Imagine you're a fallen aristocrat, boots sinking into Yorkshire mud, the sky pressing down with a sheet of cold rain. Hargrove Estate looms ahead, its ancient stones soaked dark, the manicured fields frayed by wind and time. The world calls it a jewel of the countryside, but to Eddie Beaumont, it looks like the last place on earth where anyone would give a washed-up drunk a second chance. The morning began with thunder. A warning, maybe. Or just another bad omen in Eddie's run of rotten luck. His shoes were cheap, rain seeping through at every step. He hated the way the old Hargrove gates creaked as he pushed them open, hated the damp smell of sodden grass, hated the sign that said, "No trespassing, wildlife conservation area, please respect our ponies." That last bit especially. Wildlife conservation. For ponies? Was that what his life had come to? Begging for work from the likes of Lady Amelia Hargrove, who probably thought manure was something you read about in history books? But the alternative was hunger. Eddie pushed forward, head down, muttering curses the way only a man with nothing left can. Inside the yard, a cluster of stable hands gave him the side-eye. Eddie could smell their suspicion, their contempt. Once, his family's name meant something in this village. Now, he was just the man you crossed the street to avoid at the pub. Lady Amelia herself was in the paddock, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned carelessly under a battered hat, boots caked in real mud. She had that noble look, strong jaw, eyes like cold steel. For a moment, Eddie remembered a different kind of woman. His mother, hands soft, voice gentle. But Lady Amelia looked like she could break a shovel over your back if you crossed her. "Mr. Beaumont?" she called, not raising her voice but making it clear she was in charge. "You're late. We start at dawn here." He flinched. "Couldn't sleep, ma'am. Rough night." She eyed him, his trembling hands, the smell of cheap gin barely masked by rain. "You know why you're here?" Eddie's jaw tightened. "I need work. You need help. I'm not looking for charity." "Good," she said, not a flicker of sympathy. "Because you won't get any. Hargrove Estate pays for sweat, not for stories. Follow me." As they crossed the yard, Eddie caught sight of the main paddock, a big black pony standing apart from the herd, its coat gleaming even in the gray. There was something wild about it, a look in its eyes that said, "Don't come close." The stable hands gave the animal a wide berth. "That's Thunder," Lady Amelia said. "Came out of the moors last week. We're keeping him separate until he settles in. He's a fighter." Eddie snorted. "A pony's a pony. They all eat, sleep, and shh." "Thunder's not just a pony," she cut in. "He's a survivor. Like you, perhaps." That stung. Eddie turned away, fists clenched, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. He followed Lady Amelia through the stables, past stalls filled with rain-soaked hay and the sweet, sour smell of horses. His first job? Muck out the worst stall, then haul buckets of water from the old well. It was honest work, but not easy. Mud stuck to everything. His back ached within minutes. His hands, soft from too many nights wrapped around a pint glass, were raw and red in no time. The other workers laughed under their breath, nudging each other, whispering. Eddie pretended not to hear. As the rain hammered down, the yard filled with the shouts of the stable hands bringing the ponies in for shelter. Thunder bucked and kicked, refusing to let anyone near. A stable hand, young and cocky, tried to rope him. Thunder reared up, eyes rolling. The crowd jeered, the lad stumbled back, cursing. Eddie watched, something mean and sour building inside. All his anger, all his failure boiling over. He hated the way they looked at him, hated the way the pony refused to be tamed, hated how everything seemed to go wrong, no matter what he did. When Lady Amelia came back to check his progress, she found him leaning on a pitchfork, sweat and rain mixing on his brow. "Not up to the task?" she asked. Eddie spat on the ground. "It's a waste. These ponies, they're wild. You can't save them. They don't want saving." She stepped close. "You don't get to decide what deserves saving." He bristled. "And what about me? You going to save me, Lady Hargrove?" A moment's silence. Thunder, just yards away, pawed the ground, nostrils flaring. "Redemption's earned," she said, "for man or beast." That did it. The crowd, the rain, the humiliation. Eddie snapped. He lurched toward the paddock, shoving open the gate before anyone could stop him. "Hey!" shouted a stable hand. But Eddie was already inside, face to face with Thunder. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The rain was a wall of sound. Thunder stared at Eddie, ears pinned flat. Eddie, blinded by rage and shame, lashed out, a swift, vicious kick to Thunder's flank. The sound was sickening. Hoof-striking boot, the pony's scream tearing through the yard. Blood spattered onto Eddie's pants. Thunder staggered, then reared, kicking wildly. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted for help. Lady Amelia rushed forward, fury in her eyes. "What have you done?" she demanded, voice trembling. "Get out, now, get out!" Eddie stood frozen, heart pounding. The realization crashed down. He'd crossed a line. Thunder lay panting, blood seeping from a gash. The stable hands looked at Eddie with naked disgust. Lady Amelia turned to the workers. "Call the vet and call the constable." She faced Eddie, jaw set. "You have two choices. Stand trial for animal cruelty or stay here and work, every day, every hour, until you've paid your debt." He looked at her, rain streaming down his face. For the first time in years, he had no clever words, no smart retorts. Only a hollow ache and the knowledge that everyone here, man and beast, had just seen who he really was. Far off, a black car idled at the end of the drive. Lord Reginald Fairfax, eyes cold behind the glass, watched the chaos with the ghost of a smile. The rain kept falling, washing the blood into the Yorkshire mud. Would Eddie choose to change, or would the past drag him down once more? Now picture this. Your boots caked in mud, your body aching from a sleepless night, and everyone on the Hargrove Estate looking at you as if you're lower than the muck you're about to shovel. That's Eddie Beaumont's reality as he faces his first day of redemption, sentenced by Lady Amelia herself to backbreaking work, all while the sting of yesterday's shame gnaws at him. The rain hadn't let up. It drummed steadily on the stable roof, a gray, endless Yorkshire drizzle that soaked straight through Eddie's jacket. At dawn, Lady Amelia handed him a battered shovel and pointed to the filthiest stall, Thunder's. No one else wanted that job. The pony, still limping and wild-eyed, huddled at the far end, flanks twitching every time Eddie drew near. The stable hands watched from a distance, arms crossed, faces tight. A few muttered, but most simply glared, sending a silent message. "You don't belong here. You're the reason Thunder's hurt." Eddie tried to ignore them. He shoved the shovel into the thick straw, sweat beading beneath the layers of grime. Every movement sent a jolt up his back. His palms blistered, then bled. His mind wandered, drifting to pints at the Dog and Duck, to laughter by a warm fire, to a time when his family name opened doors instead of closing them. Suddenly, a hoof slammed the wall. Thunder snorted, eyes wild. Eddie froze. He took a deep breath, held out a hand, palms open, trying to show he meant no harm. "Easy, boy," he muttered. "I'm not proud of what I did." Thunder's ears flattened. For a second, Eddie thought the animal might charge, but the pony just stood his ground, chest heaving, defiant as ever. Eddie felt something shift inside, a flicker of regret, or maybe guilt. He glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one was watching, and whispered, "I'm sorry. All right? Didn't mean for it to go like that." Outside the stable yard was a whirlwind of activity. Workers hammered fence posts, patched leaking roofs, and wrangled horses that refused to be tamed by anything but patience. Eddie, eager for distraction, threw himself into their work, hauling buckets of water through puddles that sucked at his boots, stacking hay bales until his arms shook. Sweat mixed with rain. Every muscle screamed, but the whispers never stopped. "Watch out! Beaumont's got a temper. Maybe he'll take it out on the cows next. Should have thrown him off the land. He's nothing but trouble." Each word stung worse than the last. At lunchtime, Eddie tried to find a dry corner in the tack room, only to have the others file in, giving him no more space than a stray dog. He stared at the floor, hunger clawing at his gut, pride clashing with the growl of his empty stomach. Lady Amelia entered, her boots echoing on the tiles. She handed out mugs of tea, ignoring the tension, before turning to Eddie. "You're not finished yet," she said quietly. "The back paddock's flooding. You'll help fix the fence." No rest then. Just more mud, more rain. Out in the paddock, the grass had turned to a shallow lake, the fence sagging under the weight of sodden wood. Eddie joined two workers, one a red-faced, stocky man named Bill, the other a slim, sharp-eyed woman called Jo. Neither offered a greeting. The three struggled in silence. The fence posts wouldn't hold. The hammer slipped in Eddie's aching hand. Bill grumbled, "Watch it, would you?" Jo rolled her eyes. Every mistake Eddie made, every stumble or slip, seemed to confirm what they thought of him. Hours passed. The rain eased for a moment, replaced by a cold wind that cut through Eddie's jacket. That's when Lord Reginald Fairfax arrived. Immaculate suit, expensive umbrella, that oily smile. He strode across the field as if he owned the place. "Hard at work, I see," Fairfax called out, voice dripping with mock concern. "Lady Amelia's got you earning your keep at last, Eddie?" Eddie stiffened. "Just doing my job." Fairfax leaned close, dropping his voice. "You know, it's a pity. Men like us. Once we were the backbone of this land. Now we're laborers, cleaning up after animals. Wouldn't you rather be part of something bigger?" Eddie glared at him. "I don't need your advice." Fairfax shrugged. "Suit yourself. Some of us are moving on. Some of us know when to seize an opportunity." He shot a sly look toward the house before walking off, coat spotless, boots barely touched by mud. Jo snorted. "That one's trouble. Don't let him get in your head." Eddie muttered, "I can handle myself." But the truth was, Fairfax's words stuck. Eddie felt the weight of the past. His family's fall, the wasted years, the anger simmering just below the surface. He hammered another post, too hard, splitting the wood. Bill cursed. Jo rolled her eyes again. Eddie's hands throbbed, knuckles raw and bleeding, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. By dusk, the yard was a muddy battlefield, and Eddie was losing. He stumbled back to the stable, mud up to his knees. Thunder stood at the gate, watching with those sharp, accusing eyes. Eddie tried again, voice cracking. "You and me both, huh? Neither of us wanted to end up here." A shadow moved at the stable door. Lady Amelia, arms folded. "He'll come around if you do the work. You want redemption, Mr. Beaumont? It starts with doing right by thunder." Eddie nodded, too tired to argue. That night, alone in the cramped workers' quarters, Eddie nursed his blistered hands and stared at the rain streaking the window. The laughter from the pub drifted across the fields, warm, mocking, a reminder of everything he'd lost. He wondered if anyone could really change, if working in the mud, day after day, could wipe away the past, or if he'd always be the man who kicked a wounded animal just because life hadn't gone his way. He drifted into a fitful sleep, dreams haunted by the image of Thunder's wide, accusing eyes and the echo of Lord Fairfax's cold, dangerous promise. The road to redemption, it seemed, was longer and lonelier than Eddie had ever imagined. Imagine the hush that follows a storm, when even the birds seem to hold their breath and the mud settles beneath your boots. That's the air Eddie Beaumont walked through the next morning at Hargrove Estate. Soaked fields shimmering under a watery sunrise, horses huddled close for warmth, everything quieter, gentler. But beneath the calm, new worries pressed in on him. He'd survived his first day of punishment, but every muscle ached, and his name still tasted like shame in the mouths of the people around him. Work began early, as always. Lady Amelia handed out assignments in her brisk, businesslike way, the sleeves of her work shirt already rolled, dark hair pulled tight at her neck. She'd put Eddie with Jo, the sharp-eyed woman from the paddocks, to help check on the rest of the ponies and repair a leaky section of roof. The tasks were repetitive, dull, but the rhythm of labor was soothing after the storm of the day before. For the first time, Eddie let himself listen to the scrape of Jo's hammer, the low hum of horses, the distant call of crows. Inside the main stable, Thunder still kept his distance. The black pony moved stiffly, the wound on his flank cleaned and bandaged by the vet, but his trust was gone, ears always back, eyes fixed on Eddie. Misty, a smaller gray pony with a snub nose and a curious habit of bumping Eddie's shoulder with her muzzle, watched the two of them, as if judging who might break first. Eddie followed Jo's lead, learning how to change the straw, how to move quietly around nervous animals. He remembered Lady Amelia's words. "You want redemption? It starts with doing right by Thunder." At midday, Lady Amelia called for everyone to help set up for the estate's weekly fundraising tea, a tradition, she explained, that brought in city folks and neighbors with deep pockets, all in the name of wildlife conservation. The manor house was suddenly alive with preparations. Fine china was pulled from a battered cupboard. Tablecloths, once white, were carefully pressed. Eddie found himself assigned to help serve, awkwardly at first, fumbling the teapots, nearly dropping a platter of scones. The other workers watched, some with a smirk, a few with grudging respect. "Don't worry," Jo said under her breath. "No one gets it right the first time. You ever poured tea for a table of barristers and bankers?" Eddie shook his head. "Not since my mother's last garden party, and that was a lifetime ago." The line hung in the air. For a moment, Eddie thought Jo might press him on it, but she only smiled, faint and lopsided. "Well, welcome back to the big leagues, Beaumont. Don't spill on the Duchess." The guests arrived, umbrellas in hand, city shoes hopelessly muddied by the walk from the lane. Lady Amelia worked the crowd with the easy charm of someone who'd done it all her life, explaining the estate's mission, sharing stories of the ponies, laughing at the right moments, listening just as much as she spoke. She wore her lineage like a suit of armor, never letting anyone see a crack. Eddie poured tea, served biscuits, and tried to fade into the background. But he couldn't help overhearing the whispers. "Is that the Beaumont boy? I heard his family lost everything after the old man's scandal. Did you see the way he looks at the horses? Some people just can't be trusted around animals." He kept his head down. But the sharpest pain wasn't the gossip. It was watching Lady Amelia fight to keep her estate afloat. Every handshake, every forced smile, another bid for survival. Later, after the last slice of cake was served and the guests trailed out with polite farewells, Eddie was left with Joe to clean up. She handed him a broom and a wink. "You survived. That's more than I expected. Come on, let's get this done before Amelia finds another job for us." As they worked, Misty nosed around the courtyard, her coat already drying in a shaft of sunlight. Eddie crouched, palm out, and for the first time, the little gray pony stepped forward, snuffling his hand before nudging his elbow. Something loosened in his chest, a knot of guilt maybe, or the first thread of hope. "Looks like someone's forgiven you," Joe called, grinning. "Wish the rest of you would," Eddie shot back, but the words were softer, almost joking. "Give it time," Joe replied, more seriously. "Out here, we don't forget quick, but we do notice when a man tries." That afternoon, Eddie found himself alone in the yard, a rare, quiet moment. He watched thunder across the fence, the black pony grazing with his head low, still limping but less wary. Eddie stepped closer, just a few feet, then stopped. He didn't speak. He didn't try to reach out. He simply stood there, breathing the same air, letting the silence say what words couldn't. A sudden shout echoed from the lane. Eddie spun. Lord Reginald Fairfax, flanked by two men in expensive coats, was leaning over the fence, laughing loudly. "Afternoon, Lady Hargrove," Fairfax called, waving a gloved hand as if he owned the place. "Lovely tea as always. Shame about the weather, but then you're used to storms, aren't you?" Lady Amelia stood her ground, face calm. "We're proud of what we do here, Lord Fairfax. Some of us believe in looking after our own." Fairfax's smile sharpened. "There's always a price, Amelia. Don't forget, I'm still interested in acquiring this old heap if you ever tire of patching up horses and rain-soaked roofs." The threat was plain, but Lady Amelia only nodded. "If you'll excuse us, we have real work to do." As Fairfax retreated, Eddie felt a cold fury build in his gut. He'd grown up with men like that, smooth talkers, never dirtying their own hands, always ready to buy what others had bled to keep. For the first time, he wondered if maybe he cared about this place too. Evening settled over Hargrove Estate, mist rising from the fields, the last sunlight catching on wet grass and battered fences. Eddie, sore and tired, stood by Misty's stall, stroking her nose, thinking of the battles still to come. He glanced at Thunder, watching from the shadows, and made a silent promise. Tomorrow, he'd try again. For the pony, for himself, for a future not yet lost to mud and memory. Yorkshire rain returned at midnight, soaking through every old tile of the estate roof and rattling the window panes in the workers' quarters. Eddie Beaumont woke before dawn, shivering in the chill, muscles stiff from days of hard labor. The aches in his hands and back were nothing compared to the heavier ache in his chest, a bruised kind of longing for forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved. He rose in the dark and dressed quietly, pulling on boots still caked in yesterday's mud. Joe was already outside, scarf tight against the wind, coffee steaming in a chipped mug. She nodded without words. Eddie appreciated that. The way she didn't press, didn't pity, Just let the silence sit between them, as honest as the cold. Lady Amelia appeared soon after, clipboard in hand. "We've got storm damage to fix," she announced. "Barn roof's leaking, south fence is down. Misty's taken to wandering off. Keep an eye on her, Eddie." He nodded, grateful for the trust, even if it was only with the little gray pony who seemed to have a soft spot for outcasts. The morning was a blur of movement, patching holes, hauling straw, wrestling with broken boards. Eddie worked beside Joe, their conversation mostly practical. "Where's the hammer? Pass the nails." The kind of talk that lets you feel useful without needing to share your whole soul. Around mid-morning, Misty slipped her halter and bolted toward the far pasture. Eddie gave chase, boots slipping in the mud, heart pounding. He found her at the edge of the fence, skittish, spooked by a fallen branch. He moved slowly, remembering Joe's advice. Don't rush, don't grab, just be there. He spoke softly, letting his voice blend with the patter of rain. "It's all right, girl. I get it. Sometimes you just want out, huh?" Bit by bit, Misty edged closer. When her nose finally touched his palm, Eddie felt a strange, quiet victory, a flicker of pride he hadn't felt in years. He slipped the halter back, stroking her damp neck, and led her in. Joe, watching from the barn door, gave him a rare grin. "Told you she'd come around. Animals don't lie." Back at the barn, Thunder watched the whole exchange, nostrils flaring. The black pony was still wary, keeping his distance. But when Eddie finished cleaning Misty's stall and entered Thunder's, he stood quietly at the door. He didn't try to touch, didn't dare. He just cleaned, slow and steady, keeping his voice low. "We're both a mess, huh?" Lady Amelia checked in after lunch. She looked from Eddie to Thunder, then back again, something unreadable in her eyes. "You're making progress," she said quietly. "But don't get cocky. Trust takes time." That afternoon, the rain eased, and the estate workers tackled the fallen section of the south fence. Eddie hauled fresh posts. Joe drove them deep into the muddy earth. Bill tightened wire with hands that looked built for breaking rocks. The work was exhausting, shoulders burning, palms torn anew. But there was a strange satisfaction in it. A sense of belonging that had nothing to do with bloodlines or pride. At dusk, Lady Amelia gathered everyone in the old carriage house for tea and sandwiches. It was a small ritual, but it mattered. The food tasted better after honest labor, the silence less heavy, laughter easier when shared among people who'd earned it. Eddie sat on a bale of hay, tea cradled in sore hands. Joe nudged him. "You're fitting in." Even Bill stopped glaring. He managed a half smile. Only took 3 days of bleeding for it. A shout rang out from the main road. The laughter faded. Through the windows, headlights glimmered, slicing the mist. A sleek black car pulling up to the estate gate. Lord Reginald Fairfax stepped out, his shoes too clean for this place, his eyes sharp and predatory. Lady Amelia rose, chin high. "Evening, Lord Fairfax. To what do we owe the pleasure?" Fairfax smirked, voice oily. "Just making sure everything's safe after the storm. A shame, really, if your little operation couldn't keep up with the weather. Some estates aren't meant to survive, you know." Amelia met his gaze, unwavering. "We're managing. As you can see, the community comes together here." Fairfax's eyes flicked to Eddie, lingering just a bit too long. "Glad to see you're finding useful employment, Mr. Beaumont. Perhaps you'll keep your temper in check this time." Eddie clenched his jaw, every muscle in his body tensing. The other workers watched, silent. Lady Amelia stepped between them. "If you're done, Lord Fairfax, we have chores to finish." With a last, lingering look, Fairfax retreated to his car. As the taillights faded, a heavy silence hung over the group. Amelia broke it first. "Everyone back to work. Let's show him what Hargrove Estate stands for." Evening came with a quiet hush. Eddie finished his chores, then lingered by Thunder's stall as the sky faded to indigo. The black pony watched him, eyes reflecting the last of the daylight. Eddie didn't speak. He simply leaned against the door, breathing in the smell of hay and rain and horse. Slowly, Thunder stepped closer, close enough that Eddie could see the scar beginning to heal on his flank. Eddie didn't reach out. He let the moment settle, quiet and true. He remembered something his father once said, years before everything fell apart. Trust is earned in inches, not miles. As the estate grew quiet, Eddie realized that maybe, just maybe, he'd started earning his first inch back. And outside, beyond the fence, Lord Fairfax watched the estate from his parked car, eyes narrowed, plotting the next move in a game that was only just beginning. Yorkshire nights always seemed longer after a storm, the darkness thick and close, the smell of damp earth clinging to every breath. Eddie Beaumont lay awake in his bunk, listening to the sigh and creak of the old workers' quarters, the distant snort of horses unsettled in their stalls. A thin sliver of moonlight traced the scar on his hand where a nail had slipped earlier that day, a small hurt compared to the ache in his chest. He had started to believe, just a little, that things could be different at Hargrove Estate. He was working hard, earning nods from Joe and even Bill, feeling the world shift an inch at a time beneath his battered boots. But peace never lasted long in a place where old money and new greed collided. A sudden crack split the night. Eddie jolted upright, heart pounding, unsure if he'd dreamed the noise or if it was real. Another bang, sharper this time, followed by the unmistakable, gut-wrenching bleat of a panicked animal. Then, through the warped glass of the dorm window, he saw it, a faint orange glow rising behind the barn, flickering wild, growing. "Fire!" he yelled, springing from bed and slamming open the door. His shout echoed across the yard, waking the others. Boots thudded against floorboards, voices scrambled into chaos. Joe and Bill ran past, half-dressed, faces white with fear. "Where?" Joe shouted. Eddie pointed, sprinting into the night, lungs burning from the cold. Smoke already curled across the yard, thick and bitter, sending the horses into a frenzy. Sparks leapt in the wind as flames clawed up the side of the old wooden hayshed, just a dozen yards from the stables where Thunder, Misty, and the other ponies were trapped. For a moment, panic nearly swallowed Eddie. The heat, the shouts, the memory of past failures, all threatened to send him running the other way. But he forced himself forward, teeth clenched, eyes stinging from the smoke. Bill grabbed a hose. Joe dragged buckets from the well. Lady Amelia appeared as if conjured by the storm, barking orders over the roar. "Get the doors open! Get the horses out!" she commanded. Eddie stumbled toward the stable, heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. Inside, the air was thick with fear and smoke. Thunder reared, kicking the stall gate, eyes rolling, nostrils flaring. Misty whinnied, slamming her small body against the wood, desperate for escape. Without thinking, Eddie fumbled for the latch, cursing as his fingers slipped on the cold metal. Thunder's head swung dangerously close, but Eddie stood his ground. "Easy! I'm here! I'm not leaving you! Just hold on!" Behind him, Joe struggled with Misty's door. Bill and two other workers shouted from the yard, water splattering uselessly against the blaze as flames leapt higher. The fire was spreading too fast, fueled by dry straw and the restless wind. Eddie's mind raced. If they didn't get the horses out now, nothing else would matter. At last, the latch gave way. Thunder exploded from the stall, nearly bowling Eddie over. He grabbed the lead rope, wrapping it around his wrist, praying the animal wouldn't bolt into the flames. "Come on," he begged, voice hoarse. "We have to go. Trust me just this once. Please." Thunder hesitated, snorting, eyes wide. The stench of burning wood filled the air. For a split second, Eddie saw his own terror mirrored in the pony's eyes. Two lost souls, caught between running and standing their ground. A falling beam crashed behind them. Eddie ducked, hauling Thunder forward, heart hammering. In the chaos, something clicked. The pony moved with him, pressing close, muscles quivering but trusting, even if just for a moment. Together they lunged through the thick smoke, out into the cold night air. Jo appeared, dragging Misty behind her, coughing, face streaked with soot. "Get them to the far paddock. Move!" Eddie staggered across the yard, Thunder at his side, the fire's heat licking at their backs. Lady Amelia met him halfway, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Everyone out?" she yelled. "Almost. Bill's still inside," Jo called, voice breaking. Without thinking, Eddie shoved Thunder's rope into Amelia's hands and ran back toward the burning stable. The door was half blocked by a fallen rafter, flames gnawing at its edges. He could barely see, smoke burning his eyes and throat. "Bill!" he shouted, stumbling inside. He found Bill wrestling with the last pony, terrified and wild. Together, they dragged the animal free, Bill gasping curses, Eddie half carrying him through the thickening smoke. Every step felt heavier, the heat a living thing, chasing them out. Finally, they burst into the open, collapsing in the mud. Lady Amelia and Jo rushed to help, hands pulling them clear as the roof finally caved, sending a cloud of sparks soaring into the sky. For a long moment, no one spoke. Horses huddled in the far paddock, steam rising from their flanks, eyes huge with fear. The barn was gone, blackened bones smoldering against the pale dawn. Eddie lay on his back, lungs burning, the taste of smoke sharp in his mouth. Above him, stars blinked through thinning clouds. Jo handed him a bottle of water. "You're crazy, you know that?" she muttered, almost smiling. "Maybe," Eddie rasped, "but I'm here, aren't I?" Lady Amelia crouched beside them, eyes shining with relief and exhaustion. "You saved them. You all did." Bill groaned, sitting up. "If I ever have to run into a burning building again, I'm blaming you lot." A laugh broke through the shock, a thin, ragged sound, but real. For the first time, Eddie felt something like pride swelling in his chest, not just for himself, but for all of them. Then, across the yard, the headlights of a black car blinked on, piercing the smoke and dark. Lord Fairfax, who had watched the fire from the safety of his seat, drove slowly away, a small, satisfied smile flickering in the rearview mirror. Eddie saw it, and his gut twisted. This hadn't been an accident. The test wasn't over. In the ashes of the barn, with Thunder shivering at his side, Eddie realized the real fight for Hargrove Estate had only just begun. Dawn broke slow and pale over Hargrove Estate, painting the burned skeleton of the barn in shades of ash and regret. Smoke still drifted in lazy spirals from the blackened timbers, and the ground was scarred with the tracks of running boots and frantic hooves. Eddie Beaumont moved through the gray morning like a man reborn and battered all at once. His body aching, lungs sore from smoke, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. By the time the fire brigade finished dousing the last stubborn embers, the estate had transformed from chaos into a kind of grim order. Horses huddled together in the paddock, trembling but alive. Lady Amelia checked them each in turn, her touch gentle, her face streaked with soot. She gave orders quietly, her voice hoarse but steady. Account for everyone, assess the losses, clean up what could be salvaged. Eddie found Thunder in the farthest corner of the field, skittish and covered in a fine layer of ash. The black pony limped, but otherwise looked whole. Eddie crouched nearby, not reaching out, just talking in a low voice as the sun crept higher. "You did good, boy," he murmured. "Better than I ever did most days." Thunder's ear flicked. He didn't run. Eddie stayed with him for a long moment, drawing a strange comfort from the pony's quiet company, a trust that, though fragile, was real. But as the morning wore on, the aftershocks set in. The estate workers, tired, bruised, still reeling from the night, took stock of what was gone. Hay for winter, precious tools, mementos, all reduced to smoldering rubble. Joe, face grim, led the effort to build a makeshift shelter for the ponies. Bill scowled but worked twice as hard as usual. Even Lady Amelia's composure slipped when she thought no one was watching. Eddie caught her staring at the ruins, shoulders trembling ever so slightly before she squared up again and kept moving. By noon, a few local farmers arrived to help. Old friends, distant cousins, even a competitor or two. Yorkshire was like that. The world might turn cold, but people showed up when it mattered. They patched fences, dragged out ruined lumber, and carted in fresh straw. Nobody said much about the fire's cause, but the glances exchanged spoke volumes. Everyone knew accidents happened, but this had the stink of something planned. It wasn't long before Lord Reginald Fairfax reappeared. He arrived mid-morning in his gleaming car, suit immaculate, shoes somehow untouched by the muck. He wore an expression of polite concern, but his eyes glittered. "What a tragedy," he declared loudly, surveying the destruction. "So unfortunate, Lady Amelia. These old barns, so vulnerable to weather, and, well, to carelessness." Lady Amelia stood her ground, jaw tight. "We're managing, Lord Fairfax. Your concern is noted." He leaned in, dropping his voice just for her and Eddie, who stood nearby. "I hope this won't affect your ability to keep up with the estate's obligations. Repairs, vet bills, insurance. These things add up, Amelia. Sometimes it's wiser to let go than to drown in debt." Eddie stepped forward, fists clenched, but Lady Amelia stopped him with a glance. "We're not giving up," she said, calm and cold as steel. "Hargrove has weathered worse than fire." Fairfax's lips curled. "That's the spirit, though you'll forgive me if I speak with the fire marshal later. I'd hate for the estate's reputation to suffer any more incidents." As he walked away, Joe muttered, "Snake." Bill spat in the dirt. Eddie's anger burned, sharper than any pain from the night before. He turned back to Thunder, stroking the pony's neck as a way to steady his nerves. For the first time, Thunder didn't shy away. His muzzle pressed gently into Eddie's palm, warm and solid. In that moment, the noise of the world seemed to fall away. Eddie felt a jolt of pride, real, clean pride, the kind he hadn't known since he was a boy. The rest of the day was a blur of exhaustion and resolve. The workers rebuilt side by side, sweat and mud masking the lines between class and family and history. Lady Amelia led with the kind of quiet courage that forced respect. Eddie, once the outsider, found himself working at the heart of it all, hammering, hauling, listening to Joe's dry humor and Bill's surly encouragement. Just after sundown, as the last of the makeshift pens was secured and the horses calmed, a new commotion broke out near the estate gates. Two unfamiliar men, big, rough city accents, stood arguing with Bill about something Eddie couldn't quite catch. Bill's voice was raised. "You lot got no business here. Move along." The bigger man shoved Bill hard enough to send him stumbling. Eddie reacted before he could think. He strode forward, planting himself between Bill and the strangers, every nerve electric. "Back off," Eddie said, voice steady, fists clenched at his sides. "This is private land. You want trouble, you found it." The men sneered, but Eddie didn't back down. Others gathered, Joe, Lady Amelia, even a few local lads with hay forks. For a tense second, nobody moved. Then, without another word, the men turned and retreated to a waiting car, one that looked suspiciously like the black sedan Fairfax favored for his less public business. Eddie watched them go, heart thumping, rage and adrenaline mixing with a strange exhilaration. He felt alive, protective, part of something bigger than himself for the first time in years. Lady Amelia put a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said simply. Eddie nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That night, the workers gathered in the kitchen, battered but unbroken. Someone poured whiskey. Joe raised a toast to Hargrove, and to those who fight for it, no matter what's thrown at us. They clinked glasses. The fire outside might have taken part of their home, but inside, a different kind of fire burned, one of unity, defiance, and hard-won trust. Eddie sat beside Thunder's stall before bed, stroking the pony's mane, listening to the rain begin again on the roof. For the first time since he set foot on the estate, he realized he wasn't just fighting for redemption. He was fighting for home. Morning broke chilly and gray across Hargrove Estate, a fine mist rolling down from the moors and curling through the blackened ribs of the ruined barn. In the makeshift paddock, Thunder grazed quietly beside Misty, both animals twitching at any sudden noise. Inside the big house, the mood was tense, every word spoken in a whisper, every step echoing with the memory of last night's fire. Eddie Beaumont stood in the corner of the kitchen, cradling a chipped mug of strong tea, nerves humming like a live wire beneath his skin. Joe was frying eggs at the old iron stove, and Bill sat nearby, thumb wrapped in a makeshift bandage. The workers were quieter than usual, a new respect in their glances toward Eddie, but also worry, something dark moving beneath the surface. Lady Amelia entered, her face drawn but resolute. "We'll have to go into town today," she announced. "The constable wants statements from everyone who was on the grounds during the fire." Bill scowled. "No doubt who's behind that. You ask me, it's Fairfax pulling strings again." Joe shrugged, flipping the eggs. "He's trying to paint us as careless or worse, but he doesn't know us. Not really." Eddie set his mug down, heart thudding. "I'll tell them everything. About the men at the gate, about Fairfax's threats. Maybe it's time someone called him out." Amelia met his gaze, tired but appreciative. "We'll face it together, Mr. Beaumont." The trip into the village was a somber procession. Lady Amelia, Eddie, Joe, and Bill squeezed into the battered old estate Land Rover, the road winding through hedges just beginning to bud. The village green was already buzzing when they arrived. Neighbors clustering around the pub, whispering about the fire. Eddie felt the weight of their stares, the old shame rising in his throat, but forced himself to keep his head up. The constable's office was small and cold, the paint peeling and the air sharp with disinfectant. Lord Fairfax was there, of course. Crisp suit, silver cufflinks, a look of innocent concern painted across his features. He greeted Lady Amelia with a too warm smile. "I do hope you're all well. Such a terrible incident." You know how much I admire your work, Amelia. No one deserves this kind of tragedy. She offered a stiff nod. Thank you, Reginald. We appreciate your concern. The constable took statements in turn. Joe described the fire's start, the strangers at the gates, the heroic scramble to save the horses. Bill gave his account, voice rough with anger, never looking Fairfax in the eye. When it was Eddie's turn, he told the truth about the suspicious men, the black sedan, the way Fairfax had always been lurking at the edges, looking for a reason to take the land. Fairfax smiled thinly, eyes glinting. Conspiracy theories, Mr. Beaumont? I'm sure the authorities will get to the bottom of it. The constable was polite but skeptical, jotting everything down, promising an investigation. But as the group left, Eddie could tell by his sideways glance, some battles would be fought with more than just facts. Outside, Fairfax blocked their way, voice low and menacing. You're playing a dangerous game, Beaumont. Men like us, we don't always get a second act. Eddie stood his ground. Maybe not, but I'm not running anymore. Amelia stepped in, fierce. Back off, Reginald. You've had your fun. Hargrove isn't for sale. Fairfax's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. We'll see. The future belongs to those willing to do what it takes. They returned to the estate in silence. The workers waited in the yard, eyes anxious. Joe relayed what had happened, and for the first time Bill clapped Eddie on the shoulder. You did right, lad. About time someone stood up to the likes of him. Eddie managed a thin smile, nerves frayed, mind still reeling from the confrontation. But he felt something new, a thread of belonging, a sense that he wasn't fighting alone anymore. As dusk approached, Lady Amelia gathered everyone in the old carriage house. We're not beaten, she told them. We'll rebuild, we'll fight. But we need help. I want each of you to reach out to neighbors, friends, anyone who believes in what we do. We'll hold a fundraiser next week. We'll show Fairfax and anyone else that this estate stands for more than just land. It stands for community. The group nodded, some quietly, some with fierce resolve. Eddie volunteered to help organize, calling in old friends, even stopping by the Dog and Duck pub to spread the word. For the first time in years, people listened to him, not as a punchline or a cautionary tale, but as someone worth backing. That night, with the wind rattling the windows and the threat of Fairfax lingering, Eddie slipped into the stable, drawn by an urge he couldn't quite name. Thunder stood quietly in the gloom, ears flicking as Eddie approached. Slowly, Eddie reached out, palm up, heart pounding with a strange hope. Thunder sniffed, then pressed his warm muzzle into Eddie's hand. The contact was electric, soft, solid, real. Eddie's throat tightened, a knot of shame and gratitude rising all at once. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm trying to make it right. I won't let you down. For a moment, the world stilled, the broken past and uncertain future fading, replaced by a fragile peace. Eddie closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of Thunder's breathing, feeling the pony's heartbeat thrum against his fingers. Outside, the estate slept fitfully. But in the quiet dark, forgiveness began. Not with grand gestures, but with the simple act of trust restored. Tomorrow, there would be more battles, more threats, more hard work, more chances to fail or rise. But tonight, Eddie Beaumont stood in the stable, hand resting gently on Thunder's neck, and believed, for the first time in a long time, that maybe he was worthy of the second chance he'd been given. The sun hung low over Yorkshire, painting Hargrove Estate in gold and fire. Though the barn was only a memory now, a sense of hope pulsed through the land. Patches of new straw in the makeshift pens, neighbors dropping by with food, offers of tools, and a strong back. Even thunder seemed less skittish, moving easily alongside Misty as Eddie mucked out the stalls, his motions more confident, his worries lighter for the first time in years. But everyone knew the reprieve wouldn't last. Word had spread through the valley. Lord Fairfax was tightening his grip, using every connection in town to push the estate toward bankruptcy or scandal. He spread rumors about unpaid debts and mismanaged funds. Hargrove's name was whispered in the market and the church, sometimes with pity, often with suspicion. One evening, Lady Amelia gathered the workers as dusk crept in. "We need to meet this head-on," she declared, eyes fierce under her windswept hair. "The village is where this fight will be decided. We need to show them who we really are." Joe nodded. "Most folks just need to see us. See the animals, the work, the truth. They know Fairfax talks pretty, but he's never lifted a finger for anyone but himself." Bill cracked his knuckles. "Maybe it's time we had a word with him, proper." Eddie felt a tension in the air, like the charge before a storm. "Let's go to the pub tonight," he suggested. "If Fairfax wants to poison the well, let's drink from it ourselves and show everyone we're not running." That night, the Dog and Duck was packed. Men in muddy boots, women in bright scarves. Laughter and suspicion mixing in the low yellow light. Eddie walked in with Joe and Bill at his side. Lady Amelia trailing with a quiet strength that turned heads, the chatter dipped. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of logs on the fire. At the back corner, Lord Fairfax lounged with two well-dressed men, a fresh pint in hand. He smiled when he saw Eddie and the others, a slow, practiced thing with nothing friendly behind it. Eddie ordered a round for the workers, nodding to old acquaintances who barely met his eye. Joe leaned close. "They're waiting for someone to make the first move. That's all it ever takes." Fairfax raised his glass. "To good neighbors, may we always know which side of the fence to stand on." A few in the crowd laughed uneasily. Eddie swallowed his pride, set his glass down and turned to face the room. "Most of you know me," he called out. "You know my family's story. You know I've made mistakes, big ones. But you also know I don't run from a fight, and I don't stand by while good people get ruined." Murmurs rippled across the pub. Fairfax's eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent. Eddie pressed on, voice steady. "You've heard stories about the estate, about us. You know what Fairfax wants to build. Maybe you've been promised jobs, or a piece of something big. But you also know what this place means. Hargrove has always opened its doors when there's trouble. Storms, blackouts, sick animals. We work, we sweat, we stand together." A farmer spoke up from a corner. "That's so, Eddie? Even after all that's happened?" Eddie nodded. "Especially now. Last week I nearly cost the estate everything. I was angry and stupid, but they gave me a second chance. Hargrove is about second chances. It's about more than land or money." Joe added, "We lost a barn, not our backbone. You all know Lady Amelia. You know she wouldn't let this place fall if there was any other way." A hush fell. Bill glared across the bar. "Funny thing about fires. Seems like there's always someone hanging around with a match." The room went still. Fairfax set his glass down. "That's a dangerous accusation, Bill." Bill grinned. "So is torching a barn, if a man's stupid enough to leave witnesses." Lady Amelia stepped forward, her voice calm but cutting through the tension like a blade. "We have reason to believe the fire wasn't an accident. There are witnesses who saw unfamiliar men on the property, men who left in a car not unlike yours, Lord Fairfax." Fairfax laughed, a short, brittle sound. "My car? Amelia, surely you're not suggesting—" But before he could finish, Joe stood. "We're not suggesting. We're stating what we saw, and we'll tell anyone who asks, and the police too." A few villagers murmured, nodding. One old man, cane tapping on the floor, added, "I saw that black car parked by the lane the night of the fire. Didn't look like it belonged to anyone local." The tide turned, slow but sure. People exchanged glances, some thoughtful, others wary. Fairfax's mask slipped, just a little, his lips pulling thin. Eddie felt the old fear pressing at his chest, the urge to back down, to let someone else fight. But he held his ground. "We're not asking for trouble, just the truth. Hargrove Estate belongs to Yorkshire, to all of us who live and work here. If you want to see what we're about, come to the fundraiser this weekend. Come meet the horses. Come see what's worth saving." Fairfax rose, gathering his coat. "You're making a mistake. This village needs progress. It needs investment." A farmer barked, "We need neighbors who don't light fires behind our backs." Laughter followed. The room was no longer his. Fairfax left, face a storm cloud, his men following. Lady Amelia met Eddie's eyes. Pride and gratitude mingled in her look. "You did well," she said quietly. Joe squeezed his shoulder. Bill slapped his back, grinning. For the first time, Eddie felt the room wasn't judging him. It was welcoming him back. The night ended with stories and music, the fire burning bright. Outside, the threat remained, but inside the dog and duck, Hargrove's people had found their voices. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but tonight, unity reigned. Eddie stepped outside, the cold night air filling his lungs. Thunder and Misty waited back at the estate, a new hope stirring in the darkness. For the first time, Eddie allowed himself to believe. The estate might just survive, if enough good people stood together and refused to yield. The morning after the confrontation at the Dog and Duck was all sharp light and cold, clean air. One of those rare Yorkshire days when the clouds break just enough to remind everyone why the land is worth fighting for. The fields gleamed, silver-tipped with dew. At the heart of Hargrove Estate, the old wounds from the fire were still visible, but everywhere else you could see the signs of people coming together. Fresh boards hammered over gaps in the paddocks, a half-raised frame where the new barn would stand, neighbors' boots lined up by the back door. Eddie Beaumont woke before the sun, startled from dreams of smoke and thunder and faces in the pub. He sat on the edge of his bunk, rubbing his eyes, the familiar ache in his back replaced by a steadier, quieter ache, one that came from the knowledge that something was about to end, and something else, just maybe, was about to begin. He went out to the paddock, breath fogging in the early chill. Thunder stood by the fence, head high, coat already drying in the crisp morning breeze. Eddie leaned against a post, hands in his pockets, silent. For a long moment, he just listened. To the ponies cropping grass, to the low clatter from the kitchen window, to the distant thump of a hammer somewhere near the new barn. This, he thought, is what endures. The work, the land, the quiet morning after a storm. Lady Amelia joined him, her boots muddy, a mug of coffee in one hand. She handed it to him wordlessly, and together they watched the sun climb over the hills. "We've done well, all things considered," she finally said. "Couldn't have managed it without you." Eddie shook his head. "Wasn't just me, it was everyone." She smiled, a real, tired smile, not the polished one she used for city folks or the local council. "Maybe, but you reminded us we could stand up for ourselves. That matters. The rest of the morning unfolded with a sense of quiet urgency. The fundraiser was today, and people from all over the valley were already arriving. Farmers in battered trucks, school children with painted faces, old women with baskets of buns. Joe and Bill directed traffic, their banter sharp as ever, but their eyes softer, less guarded. The workers from the estate mingled with neighbors and strangers alike, showing off the horses, answering questions about conservation, explaining the story of the fire and the hard work since. Eddie found himself at the heart of it all. He'd never been one for crowds, but today he moved easily from stall to stall, telling anyone who asked about Thunder's recovery, about how Misty had calmed the others during the blaze, about what it meant to lose something and fight to rebuild it. For once, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt needed. He spotted Lord Fairfax lurking at the edge of the green, a sour expression on his face as he watched villagers drop coins into Lady Amelia's collection tins and sign up to help with rebuilding. He approached, not with anger now, but with something close to pity. Fairfax sneered. "You think this changes anything, Beaumont? People forget. Money wins in the end." Eddie looked him in the eye. "Maybe. Or maybe there's more to legacy than cash in a bank. Maybe it's what you leave behind in people, not just in the ground." Fairfax's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. He left before noon, his car tires kicking up gravel in defeat. The day went on. There were moments of joy. A pony ride for a shy boy who laughed for the first time all month. A round of applause for Bill's homemade pies. A group of teenagers volunteering to help finish the barn. There were moments of reflection, too. Lady Amelia leading a quiet group around the ruined site, telling them not about the loss, but about the history, the hope for new beginnings. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned and the sun drifted lower, Eddie slipped away from the main yard and found himself by the stone wall at the edge of the property. Jo joined him, hands in her pockets. "Thought you might disappear before the real work starts," she joked. Eddie chuckled. "Just needed a minute. It's a lot seeing all these people here. Didn't think it would ever feel like this again." Jo studied him. "You know you've done right by everyone here. Even Lady Amelia, she'll never say it, but you've become part of this place." He nodded, the words hitting harder than he expected. "I think I'm ready, Jo. Ready to move forward. Maybe take a job over at the wildlife sanctuary, if they'll have me. I owe it to Thunder and to myself to keep going." She grinned, slapping his shoulder. "Proud of you, Eddie. Just don't forget to visit." That evening, after the last guest left and the fields were quiet again, Lady Amelia gathered the workers in the kitchen for tea. They sat crowded together, laughter and stories echoing off the stone walls, exhaustion mixing with satisfaction. She raised her mug. "To everyone here, to those who stayed, those who came back, and those who proved redemption is possible. One day, one choice at a time." The group toasted. Eddie felt his heart swell, pride and sadness tangled together. Later, when night crept in and the estate grew still, Eddie visited Thunder one last time. The black pony came at his call, standing close enough that Eddie could rest his forehead against the animal's warm neck. "We did it, boy," he whispered, voice thick. "We made it through." He thought about everything he'd learned, not just about labor or horses or standing up to men like Fairfax, but about what truly matters. That legacy isn't money or land, but the trust and faith you build with others, the courage to admit your faults, the grit to keep moving even when you think you can't. He realized, too, that forgiveness isn't a gift you wait for. It's an action, earned through long days, honest work, and the willingness to change. That sometimes the best way to heal the past is to build a future alongside others. As he stepped away from thunder, Eddie looked up at the stars, a new peace settling over him. The estate would go on, changed maybe, but not broken. So would he. And somewhere, in the silence, he found the answer he'd been chasing for so long. It's never too late to start again, as long as you're willing to earn every inch of trust, every day. Sunrise over Hargrove Estate brought a hush that felt sacred. A silver mist curling through the grass, dew glittering on the fence rails, the ruins of the old barn still dark against the light, but no longer haunting. Instead, they stood as a marker. Here is where we lost, and here is where we began again. The land was quiet, but not empty. Every path, every hoofprint, every nail hammered into new boards spoke of lives intertwined by trial and forgiveness. Eddie Beaumont stood by the paddock with Thunder, both of them breathing in the cool air. For the first time in years, Eddie felt no urge to run, no shame dragging at his heels. Instead, there was a fullness in his chest, a gratitude for what had survived and what had changed. Hargrove bustled. The new barn frame rose like a promise. Volunteers worked side by side with paid hands, mixing cement and laughter, sharing stories as they raised the roof beams. Lady Amelia moved among them, greeting old friends, welcoming newcomers, her muddy boots proof that she belonged among the workers, not above them. That morning, Eddie joined a small group of teenagers clearing brush at the property's edge. He showed them how to swing a scythe safely, how to read the body language of a nervous pony. They listened, at first skeptically, then with real interest, as Misty nuzzled Eddie's arm, breaking down the last barrier between the troubled man and the young helpers. Eddie saw himself in their faces, the hunger for approval, the fear of failing, the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for them, too. Later, the local news arrived, curious about the estate's miracle comeback. Eddie watched as Lady Amelia handled the cameras, speaking from the heart. "We're not just preserving history," she said. "We're building a future, one that includes everyone willing to work, to care, to try again. That's what Hargrove stands for." The villagers nodded. Even those who had once doubted began to help in small ways. A tray of food left at the gate, a donation envelope, a quiet handshake. Lord Fairfax was nowhere to be seen. His shadow no longer lingered in the sunlight. Without the support of the village, his plans for the luxury resort fell flat. Hargrove Estate was no longer just Lady Amelia's burden. It was everyone's victory. That afternoon, Eddie was called to the kitchen, where Lady Amelia waited with a sealed envelope and a wry smile. "You've had a job offer," she said, sliding it across the table. Eddie turned it over, rough fingers shaking a little. The wildlife sanctuary, one of the best in the region, wanted him on staff, citing his work with traumatized animals and his growing reputation for patience. For a moment, Eddie couldn't speak. He looked at Amelia, then at Joe and Bill, who had drifted in behind him. "Doesn't mean you have to leave forever," Bill said, gruff but smiling. "There's always work here. Always a pint at the pub, too." Joe punched Eddie's arm. "You'll do great, Beaumont. Just don't get all soft on us." Lady Amelia added, "You earned this. The sanctuary is lucky to have you. But so are we. You'll always have a place at Hargrove." Eddie felt something shift, something that had been locked away for too long. He smiled, broader than he had in years. "Thank you." all of you. The days that followed blurred into a flurry of activity. The new barn rose. Children's laughter echoed as ponies nuzzled their pockets for treats. The village came together for a celebration under strings of borrowed lights, music, and stories flowing as easily as the cider. The scars of the fire remained, but they were no longer marks of defeat. They were evidence of resilience. As dusk fell on Eddie's last night at Hargrove, at least for now, he walked the perimeter, boots brushing through grass still wet with evening dew. He paused at the sight of the old barn, now cleared, flowers and young saplings marking the spot. He thought of his first day here, angry and lost, a man everyone had written off, including himself. Now, as he stroked Thunder's mane and watched the pony graze beside Misty, Eddie knew what had changed. It wasn't just the estate that had been rebuilt. It was himself. He remembered the lessons carved into every long day and sleepless night. That trust can only be rebuilt 1 inch at a time. That forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't something given for free. It's fought for in small, honest choices, in the courage to admit you're wrong and do better. That family can be made, not just from blood, but from loyalty and shared sweat and the willingness to stand together, even when the world tries to tear you apart. He'd learned that legacy isn't found in land or money or names engraved on gates. It's found in the hands you help, the animals you heal, the voices you give hope to. That's what survives, long after the storms and the fires have faded. As the stars came out, Eddie sat on the low stone wall, Thunder and Misty flanking him, the sounds of laughter drifting from the house. Lady Amelia joined him, quiet. "We did it," she said. He nodded. "We did. If you could do it all again, would you change anything?" she asked. Eddie thought for a long moment. "I'd try to do it sooner, hurt fewer people, but I think I needed to lose everything before I could see what really mattered." She smiled, sad and wise. "That's how it is for most of us. But you did see it, in the end." As the night deepened, Eddie stood, feeling the solid ground beneath his feet, the warmth of friends behind him, and the steady, hopeful breath of the horses beside him. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but this time he didn't fear it. He walked toward the house, the porch light beckoning. He turned once more to the fields, the estate bathed in moonlight, and felt a quiet promise settle in his heart. He would carry what he'd learned here wherever he went. He would live worthy of the trust he'd been given. He would always believe in the power of second chances. So ask yourself, if you found a place to start over, if you were given a chance to rebuild, would you take it? Would you earn your place 1 inch at a time? Maybe, like Eddie, you'd find that the real inheritance isn't land or money. It's the courage to begin again, and the humility to do it with others by your side. If you believe in second chances, in community, in the power to change, like, share, and tell us your story. Because here at Hargrove, every ending is just a new beginning.